This will be fun. Let's have a little pop quiz. And if you want, you can go to the chat. And Eric, you're going to help me moderate here. This is truly just an icebreaker for us to start the conversation. Pop quiz. Which political party was founded by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison in the 1790s? Any guesses?
This is in Hamilton. Democratic Republicans, that's what I thought. Democratic.
Democratic Republicans, I'm seeing. Sarah, Whigs. Okay, no Googling. No Googling. Okay. That's correct. The Democratic Republican Party was the party formed by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison in the 1790s. Who knew? Okay, next question.
I think maybe it's just because it's
Let's
not
see.
long.
And I think if someone
But there's no room. I don't know.
if you can go on mute, or if Eric, if you guys help Bird Dog me and put folks on mute.
Holly, I think you might have a hot mic here.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. What did the 17th Amendment to the Constitution allow for, and when did it pass? Any hands? Anyone want to try to go live and answer this one? Who's got a guess? The 17th Amendment.
Nice.
No senators.
Wait, who is it? Go ahead. Who is it?
Popular election of senators. Hi.
Alexander?
Yeah.
You are exactly right. It was the direct election of U.S. senators passed in 1913. I'll give a little bit more historic anecdote on that once I stop sharing my screen. But that is correct. It was the direct election of U.S. senators passed in 1913. Okay, third question. What was the last time the U.S. Constitution was amended, and for what purpose?
I don't want to give the answer. I'll let someone else say it. But can I just add that it was Texas law students who figured out that this could be done?
Nice.
And
there's some
There's
some correct answers in the chat too, Todd, for both of the last two answers.
Okay, in the chat as well. Ray Kimball, why don't you come off mute and land this one for us?
Yeah, I mean, Pete's got it in the chat, but it was the changes. It was the requirement that congressional salaries couldn't be changed until after an intervening election.
That is exactly right.
And when was that originally proposed?
So it was part of the original raft of amendments that were proposed back when the Constitution was first floated.
Yeah.
And I didn't know the thing about the UT law students. That's fascinating.
So that's exactly right. 1992 UT law student. I'm going to stop share and now I have to go. This is going to be janky, but let me go find my notes because there is some interesting history on both these questions. Let me pull you, and this is, by the way, AI at its best is producing trivia questions. So let me just mention the 27th Amendment has one of the most unusual paths to ratification in U.S. history. Originally proposed as part of, hold on a second, I think things get conflated here. Okay, sorry, let's go to the 1992 limits on congressional pay raises. In the 1980s, a University of Texas undergraduate, Gregory Watson, discovered the dormant amendment process and began a campaign writing to state legislatures and convincing them to ratify it. The spirit of anti-incumbent and good government sentiment prevalent in the 1980s and early 1990s fueled support. Grassroots and bipartisan interests converged around the amendment as a check on congressional privileges. And slowly, after 2 centuries, over 2 centuries after it was originally proposed, because it was proposed initially by James Madison in 1789. That's when this 27th Amendment was originally proposed by James Madison. Over 2 centuries later, the 27th Amendment received the required state ratifications in 1992, becoming the longest running ratification process in American constitutional history. I find that fascinating and frankly inspirational that our work and potentially constitutional amendments, which seems very possible, could in fact become possible faster than we think. All right, let me just give a little bit of historic anecdote. on the 17th Amendment, the direct election of U.S. senators passed in 1913. So before the 17th Amendment, U.S. senators were chosen by state legislatures, a system originally established in the Constitution. Over time, this process became rife with corruption, deadlock, and special interest influence as political machines often manipulated Senate elections, sometimes leaving seats vacant for extended periods. The progressive era in the late 19th and early 20th centuries brought calls for reforms that increased transparency and expanded democracy, and direct election of senators became a central issue. The coalition of reformers, journalists known as the muckrakers, and a growing grassroots movement pushed for change, arguing that the people deserved a direct voice in choosing their senators. Rural populists, and think about this in today's context, rural populists, progressive Republicans, and Democrats joined together, finding common ground in combating corruption and fostering greater democratic participation. After years of public pressure, including 10 states conducting unofficial popular elections and instructing their legislatures to appoint the people's choice, Congress proposed the amendment in 1912. It was ratified the following year, creating the current system of senators being elected directly by popular vote. So all that to say, we live in interesting times now. Our country's been through interesting times before. We've done seemingly impossible things. And I hold that as a little bit of hope and inspiration that maybe we can do some more. So, all right, I promise, Eric, no more than 10 minutes of trivia. I hope that was fun for you. It was fun for me. If that's not your version of fun, you might need to join another organization. But with that, great to see you all. And Eric, let's get into the substance of it. And I'll kick it over to you, brother.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. Todd's great at icebreakers, and I love pop quizzes, Todd. I also like it when Todd's up on stage leading people in dancing and calisthenics. So we might do that in the next all hands call. But thanks again for everyone for being here. The main topics we want to touch on today, the main topic is the Let America Vote Act and some work we've been doing inside of the VFW in support of a resolution that our Montana state leader, David Oclander, who's on the call, was able to get passed through the Montana State VFW convention back in June. He's going to share a little bit about that process. And one of our leaders, Nancy Springer, who's a fellow cheesehead, fellow Naval Academy grad, and she works for the VFW at the headquarters. She's going to talk about some of the VFW's priorities. Before I kick it over to Dave and Nancy, I was just going to set the stage and call on Alberto to also help set the stage. What is the Let America Vote Act? For those of you who aren't tracking, we have an amazing page thanks to Jameson. I'm going to drop it here in the chat. Jameson did an amazing job revamping our website. The new website launched in May. There's a page on our website that's all about the Let America Vote Act. Please bookmark it. Please spend some time with it. The Let America Vote Act was introduced as a messaging bill last Congress, and then it was reintroduced on the first day of this Congress. The sponsor is Pennsylvania Republican Brian Fitzpatrick. There's two Democratic co-sponsors, including Jared Golden from Maine, who's a Marine Corps veteran, and then another Republican co-sponsor, Andrew Garbarino. There's actually a third Democratic co-sponsor now. And what the Let America Vote Act does is simply it relies on Congress's power in Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution to regulate their own elections. And it says under that authority, we want all states to open up their primary elections to all voters for federal elections. That's under Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution. Then for the rest of the elections, they say, and states, if you receive federal election funding and you want to continue to receive federal election funding, you need to open up your primaries to all voters in all elections, including state and local elections. The third piece of the Let America Vote Act is just that states have to certify that they do not allow non-citizens to vote. And we know, I heard, on NPR earlier this week, there's a huge study that came out from the Center on Election Integrity and Innovation, that it's something that I think most of us here know, that non-citizen voting is frankly a non-issue. Out of over 11 million votes cast in Texas, they found 33 non-citizens had voted. However, the reality is there are some cities that do allow non-citizens to vote. And so in order to get bipartisan support for this bill, this was a piece of the puzzle. So that's HR 155, the Let America Vote Act. And I'm going to kick it over to Alberto to talk about, we spent some time together on Capitol Hill, and Alberto's done some amazing work writing op-eds in support of the Let America Vote Act. So what would you like to share, brother?
Yeah, absolutely. And excited to hear more from David Oclander, who's joining us here on the call about the actual push there in Montana. A huge credit to him. But separately from sort of all of this, we wanted to make sure that we were leaning in as much as we could as an organization. So Eric came to DC. Him and I spent some time on the Hill. We met with all 5 sponsors and co-sponsors of the legislation, met with their staff, and in several cases, several of those members of Congress on both sides of the aisle are sending letters to the VFW out of its national convention, urging the VFW to consider endorsing this legislation. Eric mentioned this. He wrote an op-ed that was published in Stars and Stripes, the most widely read military and veteran-centric paper in the country, advocating again for the Let America Vote Act, advocating to ensure that the VFW strongly considers endorsing the Let America Vote Act. And so just, I think the big takeaway here is we are doing everything we can to reach VFW members, to reach veterans, to make it clear that this isn't a partisan issue. It is bipartisan legislation, of course, but this is a patriotic issue, ensuring that all voters, especially and including veterans, have a chance to participate in the elections that they help fund. We have some LinkedIn communications about it, some social media communications about this, and just feel like this is a big moment. Separately from this sort of VFW push, looking to other veteran service organizations, IAVA has already endorsed the Let America Vote Act, and will be working with the other VSOs to go through their processes to promote and endorse this important legislation too. So that's what I've got here. I'll turn it back over to Eric, but appreciate seeing everybody here and your help in getting this across the finish line.
Yeah, thanks, Alberto. And so the big opportunity for us as Veterans for All Voters, this bill, this bipartisan bill, is an incredible opportunity to educate our fellow veterans about an issue that, frankly, most people are not paying attention to. And we saw an opportunity to try to do advocacy inside of a few of the legacy VSOs. And we decided to start with the VFW in part because one of our most active state leaders in Colorado, John Keene, who is on the road right now to the VFW National Convention, John had worked on a resolution in support of ranked choice voting in years past, and we wanted to learn from John what worked, what didn't work, and could we do a similar resolution inside of the VFW? We looped in Dave Oclander, who I mentioned before, and Dave's been an active member of his VFW post in Helena, Montana for a long time. And Dave, John, and I, we all attempted to introduce resolutions in support of the Let America Vote Act at our local posts. And there was only one out of the 3 of us who was successful, and that was Dave, who's going to share his story and some lessons learned. But first, before we do that, Dave, I was going to kick it over to Nancy Springer. Nancy, who works for the VFW at the headquarters, is going to just talk a little bit about the VFW's priorities in general. And I'll be seeing Nancy, and then Joy Craig is also on the call. I saw Joy. I'll be seeing them in Columbus this weekend for the National Convention, where I'll be doing advocacy in support of the Let America Vote Act. Nancy, in her official capacity, can't do that, so she's here just to share about the VFW priorities in general. So Nancy, feel free to take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, Eric. I have a couple of slides to augment my my talking here, so it's not just a monotone. Can I share independently?
You should have the ability to share,
Okay.
Nancy.
Can anybody see that?
Yep.
Okay. Well, good for me. I'm a non-technical person. So like Eric mentioned, I work at the headquarters, and just to define that, VFW headquarters is actually in Kansas City, Missouri. We are the Washington office of the VFW. Specifically, I work at the National Legislative Service of VFW headquarters, Washington. So I'm gonna go through our legislative priorities. And at our place in Washington at NLS, National Legislative Service, we're divided up into veteran-themed portfolios. We currently have 5 portfolios. I'm gonna list out the portfolios just to set the stage for all this. And my portfolio is called DAMA, Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs. We also have the Economic Opportunity Portfolio, a health-themed portfolio, an actively serving portfolio, because some of our members are still on active duty. And we're involved with those issues because also service members become veterans ultimately. And we also have a grassroots portfolio that reaches out, and that's our connection point with our volunteer VFW Legislative Committee. And those are some of the people that will ultimately review likely Dave's resolution at the convention. Okay, so given that we are a resolutions-driven organization, so we take our priorities from our members via resolutions. And good for Dave getting one through to us. And that particular resolution is going to the General Resolutions Committee, the 300 series. I am a staff advisor for that committee, so I can't give any opinions on that resolution at this time. I will be there at convention to offer technical advice to the committee members, and they are the ones that will deliberate, discuss this resolution, then ultimately vote to accept, not accept, or accept it with amendments. Okay, so let me go over our priority goals that you see on the screen here. And to put these in some broad terms, the first one has to do with healthcare. The second one has to do with military to civilian transition. And in our actively serving portfolio that's managed by Joy Craig, also on the line, she is doing a very extensive, very expansive military to civilian transition project. And she would be glad, maybe at a separate time, to go into more detail with you about that, or at convention if you see her. The third one has to do with compensation. And the fourth one has to do with that actively serving portfolio. Because like I said, some of our members are actively serving, so we deal both with Title 10 and that one portfolio. Other portfolios are specifically focused on Title 38. Let me go on to my next slide that has a little bit more specifics. Okay, taking those broad headings and segmenting them just a little bit, here are some more actionable items that have to do with our priorities, 2 of which actually have associated legislation pending. You see in the my top left corner, concurrent receipt, the Major Richard Starr Act is currently moving its way through the legislative process. And also GI Bill reforms down on the other side. The Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act is another pending legislative fix for some of those issues. And also we have alternative treatments for PTSD. What that's focusing on is asking VA to research different therapies for PTSD, such as plant-based therapies, ketamine, etc., talk therapies, those kind of things to help people with PTSD besides just giving drugs. I already mentioned the military to civilian transition process. And that also, I missed one, that also has a legislative fix pending called the TAP Promotion Act. And if passed, that would allow veteran service organizations to come into the transition assistance program class with the departing service members, to make contact with them, then at a later time, help them, counsel them with their benefits and help them with their claims. We're focused on VA community care, including modernizing the foreign medical program. And that's obviously for people who work overseas. There are some friction points and actually reimbursements of those medical costs overseas. The GI Bill reforms showcased by the Guard Reserve GI Bill Parity Act. And then in my portfolio are the last 2, unaddressed toxic exposures and fighting claim sharks. Now for toxic exposures, if you remember, almost 3 years ago, the Historic Pact Act was signed into law. and that greatly expanding healthcare access and simplified the benefits process for thousands of veterans. So we are continuing to monitor the implementation of that act, and our current focus in that area is advocating for an oversight hearing to have VA come in and explain and show that they're efficiently and effectively administering that process. And fighting the claim sharks, people have varying levels of familiarity with this particular topic. Veteran service organizations such as VFW, American Legion, DAV, and some others help service members with claims. And we do that absolutely free, no cost, because those are your benefits, and we don't charge you to help you access your benefits. Unfortunately, almost 20 years ago, there were changes made in statute that opened up a loophole in which unaccredited companies and entities jumped in and started charging exorbitant fees to service members to help them file their claims, implying that because they did a volume business, they were better somehow than the for-free veteran service organizations, and they could, because of their experience, because of their know-how of the system, they could get their claims settled quicker, and they could get back a higher disability rating. And we've been fighting that for quite some time because it's actually very exploitive, and we are clamoring for accredited agents only. And if there's going to be fees in this process at all, that they be regulated by VA and they be reasonable. So those are our top priorities in legislation, a little bit more detail. And everybody here on the screen and not on the screen actually can get involved by becoming a member of our Action Corps. So anybody out there, you don't have to be a military person, military affiliated at all. Your neighbor could join this Action Corps as well. And those are the instructions to get to Action Corps. And what you get if you're a member of Action Corps, and Action Corps is several 100,000 members right now. You get a weekly electronic newsletter that has legislative and pertinent benefits information sent to you every week, and that originates from our office. And you would be the recipient of what we call action alerts. So when we need our members to contact their elected representatives on an issue, we'll send out an action alert to the Action Corps, telling them, contact your congressperson, contact your senators, and I'm just using one that we used some months ago. Tell that person to advocate and to vote for the Major Richard Starr Act as an amendment to the Senate NDAA. So that call will go out to those hundreds of thousands of people, and in turn, their responsibility is to contact those elected officials and ask them to do that, make that vote, asking them as a constituent, because the constituent has the most power in our system. So that's how you can join in with us and stay informed as to what we're doing in our office legislatively and any updates, real-time updates on benefits. And next I have my contact information. I also have a link to that pamphlet that I showed on my second slide along with the priority goals. That goes into much more detail than the wave tops I just presented, and a link to our VFW website. So that's what I have, unless anybody out there has any questions.
That's awesome, Nancy. Thank you so much for sharing. If it's okay, we'll go over to Dave to
Sure.
do his part, and then we'll open it up for questions for either of you.
Okay.
But thank you so much for sharing, Nancy, and thanks for the good work you, Joy, and the entire team do at the VFW headquarters. And for those of you who aren't members, I joined the VFW, I believe it was about 1.5 years ago. I joined my local American Legion about 3 years ago. And again, the opportunity here is, I mean, it's community building with fellow veterans. We also know in the work we're doing on political reforms, normally the most difficult audience are, more conservative friends. And these posts are filled with more conservative people. And it's a great place to not only build relationships, but try to see what talking points resonate or what ideas of ours work or don't work with people who are generally on the more conservative side of the spectrum. So so that's hopefully a good segue, Dave O, for you. And I think you've done a brilliant job of building bridges inside the VFW, really leading by example, and then helping to get this lava resolution number 304 through the chain, brother. So go ahead and take the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Eric, and thanks everybody for being here. I want to say up front, I'm at the Global Leadership Summit, and I told Eric that I would not be able to be here if Nick Saban was going on stage. And so I think I have a very small window right now because he's about to go on. And he knows how to win. So, and we should all want to know how to win. I say that all tongue in cheek. So I want to cover 5 points, but if I could boil it down to 2 items for takeaways, one would be understanding and respecting process, and number 2 would be relationships. And just to reiterate what Eric said initially, in terms of credit and collaboration, I want to give John Keene all the credit on this. It was on one of these calls that I learned about his VFW process that he has honored over the years in Colorado. And I just said, I think that's something I can replicate. And so then I started a process of back and forth emails with John and included Eric, and we went through a series of revisions of a resolution that ultimately we finalized, and I was able to take it forward to my VFW. The point is, honor the process and don't do this alone. More minds around something like this makes the process better. John brought a lot of great ideas. Eric brought a lot of great ideas, and there were others. And of course, Lisa Rice inspired all of this activism. Next, post-level strategy. And I'm talking about the VFW post. I am a member of Post 10,010 in East Helena, Montana. And I want to start by saying I joined about 6 years ago because the VFW stuck out in my community as a very generous organization. And I was leading a nonprofit at the time. I asked them to support us. They did. I coach on a couple of kids' teams. I asked for some support. They did. Over that 6-year window, they have donated to dozens of different organizations a lot of money, whether they're veterans organizations, kids organizations, but it was through that process that I started to build relationships with a lot of folks, very diverse folks at the VFW, and it has been wonderful. They are my friends and brothers. I was there until about 11 o'clock last night at our monthly meeting. With that, I also, when I decided to bring this forward to the Post to get it passed, I asked, what is the best way to do this? And the recommendations that I got from Post members, our adjutant, commander, etc., was don't just throw this on the table in one shot, one kill. Use time as your ally. So I brought the issue up. I introduced it at a meeting. I brought the actual a copy from the congressional website of the language from the act, the Lava Act, and presented it with the context that IAVA has already endorsed this. And I was going to come back the following month to give a little more detail. What that started to do was it germinated thinking around this. It germinated ideas around people who supported this, as well as voices who were concerned about this or outright did not support it. At the second month of 3, I brought an information paper that spelled out why this was very important. And I'll hit some of those points in a minute. But I brought this paper. Again, I presented language about the resolution. And we had another discussion about this. And that's when both sides were able to talk about the pros and the cons of this. All the while, I'm taking notes about what the opposition is to this. So then in the third meeting, when I brought it forward for a vote, I was able to I call it the Eminem principle. If you've ever seen his movie, I got out in front of the criticism and called it out with the explanation of why I didn't think those criticisms were relevant and why it was very important, especially for veterans, to support something like this. So it was a 3-month process. The info paper was about clarifying, informing, and addressing concerns, and I leveraged relationships throughout. I was able to pass at the post level, and it's a very conservative community. So, and we had overwhelming support at the post. And so I was really encouraged by that outcome. Then the process is you take it to the state convention. And importantly, and I'll hit this in my last point, it's an annual process. The only way that you get a state to endorse things and vote on them is once a year, and you have to honor that timeline. Otherwise, you're going to have to wait another 12 months. So at the state level, there was no 3-month process. So how I modified this was I spent a lot of time with the Rules Committee and the committee that was considering this resolution coming before for a general vote. Both of those entities are very important. The Rules Committee can veto anything coming to the floor. The committee that's going to consider it, generally the vote is going to follow what the committee recommends. So again, I went forward with an information paper. I had sit-down conversations with members from both of those committees. I did some calling before the state convention to make sure that people understood some of the details. And it was through that process that we were able to get it passed. I think importantly, the tone that I tried to strike throughout was humility and curiosity, and again, trying to inform people, not persuade people. And also describing how this fits in to the VFW mission, as well as how it fits in with 55% of our population, general population, that does not identify with the party. As a result, when we took the vote at the state, again, very conservative state, it passed overwhelmingly with a 2-to-1 ratio. Key lessons and takeaways, this is my 4th point. Know your audience. Speak to veterans' values and not partisanship. I tried to make sure that I spoke about this not being a partisan red-blue issue, but a civics issue. I thought that was important. Again, the Eminem principle, get ahead of the objections and have sit downs with people, build relationships. All of that allowed me to stay mission focused and describe how this was going to make the VFW stronger. In terms of the winning arguments that I think resonated with people at the post and the state level, I pointed to some statistics that you can Google. The VFW has lost members over the last decade, 200,000 members. The power of the VFW, American Legion, DAV, et cetera, is in numbers. When you go to the Hill and you talk to representatives, senators, et cetera, they know that 1.4 million people are a part of that organization. And typically we vote. So the more veterans that we can get voting, and again, context, 55% of us are independents. If we are frozen out of primaries, that lessens our influence on the Hill. So that argument I thought was really powerful. I used a couple of examples, Pennsylvania, where there are 770,000.
Hey, buddy, how was your day?
Good. How was yours?
Oh, I'm on a call right now, but we're on mute.
There we go. 770,000 veterans, which translates to close to 400,000, are not allowed to vote in primaries. And then I also talked about how LAVA empowers veterans and protects our influence and strengthens our democracy, all core values within the state. And then the last thing I'll say is this. When we were working on a resolution about a year ago to push forward some election reform. The folks in my state who are running that election initiative, they were talking about how do we get the stock growers involved? How do we get the pipe fitters to endorse this, et cetera, et cetera. We had already blown by their timeline for their annual conferences, and you cannot get anything voted on and endorsed by those trade organizations without respecting their timeline. And so if anybody plans on doing this, A, respect that annual timeline, and B, build relationships.
Awesome.
That's all.
Dave. Yeah, outstanding work, brother. So yeah, let's Dave, I can't thank you enough for all you've done and for sharing these really practical insights. Let's open it up for any questions for Dave or Nancy. No questions too big or too small. Feel free to drop it in the chat, or if you want to, raise your hand, or the old-fashioned way, or using the raise the hand button on the bottom.
Yeah, Eric, I wanted to just take a minute, let my colleague, Joy Craig, if you have anything to add to the brief I gave?
No, you nailed it.
Okay.
Thanks, Nancy.
Okay, thanks.
Or Todd or Alberto, any commentary, anything you wanted to add?
I would just say this. I think, Dave, you said something important, which I think is sort of around tone. We're coming out of the last election cycle where we were in full advocacy mode. And one of the things that we're thinking about internally as an organization is there's sort of three things that we do simultaneously, and sometimes they're in conflict with each other. One is like we advocate, which is like we are mad. We do have a point of view. Like we are in protest mode. We are like creating accountability and discomfort for elected officials to kind of force them to pay attention to our issues. We're writing op-eds. Like, so it's, it's a strong offense, which is advocating. There's a different role that we play, which is to educate. And I think in that, like, this is, I think, the resolution process. It's much more about walking people through a set of sincere sort of logic that we've arrived at, which is like, hey, there are this many number of people in this state who can't vote in these elections, or they're in this state, 86% of elections are determined not in the general election, and we think that's unhealthy for democracy. But it's like adopting a posture of, we're not going to try to force a solution. We want to walk alongside you as we explore and understand these things together. And then the third thing that we do is be expert. And like, that's where Eric's been, giving expert testimony into state legislatures, and open primaries does that. Like Nancy's obviously an expert. And so we want to be seen as an expert organization where elected officials are coming to us to say, hey, help me understand this issue because we know that you're closest to it. And I'm not scared that if I come to you sincerely and ask questions that you're going to like put me on blast because you're also an advocacy organization. And so that's just I just want to like raise that tension to say, we're thinking about how do we wear all those hats, like advocate when needed, be expert when needed, but also help kind of like walk alongside folks from the communities that we're at, from the places where we live, from the organizations in which we're already, associated, already serving as members, to kind of just continue to elevate this. And I think we just kind of have to do all those things, but I just wanted to raise that as like that we're trying to do kind of all those roles and trying to be thoughtful about how to do that and not create collateral damage. I also think this is a long view. Part of what's interesting, and then we'll go to Mark, your comments and others, when you think about the amendment process historically, is like you don't actually know the breaking point for when this stuff kind of captures national attention and breaks through in a larger way. And so I just really think a lot of our work needs to be planting like 1,000 seeds, having 1,000 conversations, building 1,000 relationships, getting to know our elected officials before we have anything to ask of them. So that, because we don't know when the window's coming. So what we can control is building relationships, establishing ourselves as credible. We can't force people to get curious before they want to get curious, or feel the acute pain until it really feels acute. but we can be ready, you know, and so I think that's a little bit of where we're at. And, you know, there's all this kind of stuff going on around gerrymandering, and we can talk about that too. But so I think there's a tipping point moment. I couldn't tell you where or when or how, and I, you know, like, you know, Ferdinand being the trigger point for World War II, but I think there's something coming, World War I, but let's get ready. And so I think the work that you're doing, Dave, is really important. And that's a long way of saying it's important even if the VFW doesn't ultimately adopt this as a national policy position. It's like, that to me is in some ways the least material outcome of this. It's like all the kind of conversations that are taking place alongside that are the things that actually I think are going to be so important and productive. So anyway, sorry to be long-winded.
Yeah, no, thanks. Great thoughts, Todd. Mark, did you have a question or something you wanted to add?
I'm curious because you and David both mentioned, and we've been talking this for months, most vets are independents, but the service organizations have got a conservative lean. So and also you notice somebody mentioned decrease in membership. So why is that? Are the service organizations not attracting the independents? Should we be joint? It just seems like there's some sort of disconnect there that we ought to be working on, and I don't know what it is. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll give you my thoughts real quick, and then Dave, feel free to hop in. I think it's primarily an age thing, Mark. You know, the membership of the legacy VSOs tends to be older. Older veterans tend to be a little whiter and a little more conservative, right? And then you have younger post 9/11 VSOs that are much more reflective of the younger, you know, generation of veterans. I don't know, any other thoughts, Dave? Or
Yeah, I live in Helena, Montana, right? And some of the newer VSOs that I have great respect for, they don't exist here. So if you're a veteran, and there's a huge percent of Montana residents relative to the rest of the country that are veterans, if you're a veteran, you're going to belong to the Legion or the VFW, and we have a very active, large population in our post. An up and coming leader is the junior vice right now at the national level. So very active folks. I will say that in terms of age diversity, we're very age diverse, but based on where we are, you're going to belong to one of these two legacy organizations. That said, Montana is a pretty conservative state, right? So you're going to get more conservative folks. I was in a VFW in Chicago about a year ago, and it was a very, very different group of folks. So I think that the diversity changes with where you are, the type of community that you're a part of. I do think that all VSOs need to consider how they are attracting new people and the work that they're doing in order to advocate. And I think that I'm very comfortable with the work that the VFW is doing locally and nationally with the priorities that Nancy laid out. I feel very good about those. And the fact that we were able to move something along like this and get it up to the national level to vote, I think is indicative that that there are people who are willing to consider different things. I don't know if I'm answering your question directly, Mark, but that's where I think I'd take it.
Yeah, I don't know that is an answer, but it's just curious that the different parts don't seem to jive.
Right.
And it seems like maybe an opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question, Mark. And so I do want to open it up. We're getting here with about 13 minutes left. Open it up for some quick state updates. The last things I'll say on the VFW and our LAVA resolution number 304. I'll be at the National Convention, the VFW National Convention in Columbus this Saturday through Tuesday. Our booth number is 711. If you know anyone who's going to be there, send them to the VAV booth. We'll give them some swag and talk to them. And then just, you know, send positive thoughts or prayers or whatever our way on Sunday and Monday. This will be heard by a committee on Sunday, and hopefully by the general business meeting on Monday. The last thing I'll say is what you can do in your district where you live, take that VAV lava page that I showed you on the website. Please fill out the email form to send a message to your representatives. One step better would be schedule a meeting with a staff member at your district office and just find out where your representative stands on the Let America Vote Act, just to start a conversation. So, and if you do that, please let us know. We'd love to thank you with some swag if you're able to do that. I see 2 more hands up. Alberto, Dave.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. I just wanted to highlight one thing that I feel is pretty important here, and it's that Veterans for All Voters is a community of veterans. The VFW is a community of veterans, and Eric wrote about this in his op-ed, and I think it's just like something I really want to highlight. You know, VAV, we aren't policy experts on claim sharks or on VA benefits or those things. We care really deeply about those issues that matter to the veteran population. And those members of Congress, our elected leaders, aren't going to take that veteran voice seriously, the VFW seriously, if we are not able to vote in our elections. And so something like the Let America Vote Act allows veterans to participate in their elections, that 55 to 59% of veterans who are independents, and then can advocate against claim sharks, and then can advocate for VA benefits that we also strongly believe in and rely on as a veteran community. And so while we're sort of approaching these veteran communities from different parts of the challenge or problem, I just think it's important to highlight that we as a voting bloc deserve to be taken seriously, and the contributions of veterans deserves to be taken seriously in our country too. And that won't happen if we're not able to vote. So over to you, Dave, for a final word here before we go around for states.
Yeah, I just wanted to call out the comment in the thread by Mike Cantwell and Claudia Reisner. Mike said conservatives can be independent, and Claudia said and liberals can be independent. And I think that's the right, I think that's an important piece to keep in mind. And that's what I find at my post. While most folks are conservative, they're also very independent minded, and they're willing to listen and consider if you have a relationship with them.
I wanted to just build on this one second because I think it's so important. I've stopped using kind of conservative, progressive as a frame because I think that actually keeps us stuck. And we're actually, because we can play on that entire continuum. I think what we are up against is like very partisan versus post-partisan. You know, people who wait to see what the sort of handed answer is versus like are willing to do their own thinking. And that willingness to be intellectually honest cuts across like very conservative folks, very progressive folks. We have, you know, great support amongst the libertarian communities, you know, where there's like organizational support for the reforms that we're advancing. And those folks are typically like right of right in a lot of the states in which they operate. And same things too on the left. So I'm trying to, in my own lexicon, kind of abandon conservative progressive because that sort of like fits the binary frame of the debate that we are up against in general, and just talk about like very partisan people are maybe not interested in what we're doing. People that are willing to look beyond their party are. And it's interesting because in that frame, no one wants to sort of identify as very partisan. It feels limiting, which we think it is. So, but I'm interested in this thread as well. And I don't want to, we never want to exclude folks by pre-qualifying who can come to this with an intellectually honest opinion about why it's not working, and detaching that, frankly, from the political outcomes.
Well said.
So,
well said, TC. All right, on the state updates, I know Lisa Rice, there's 30 minutes or an hour you could share on DC. Unfortunately, we only have a minute or two for an update on your heroic efforts with the DC City Council. What would you like to share with us, Lisa?
I'm going to give it 2 minutes. And David, thank you for the compliment. I don't know what I did to inspire you, but hell's bells if it's working. Good for you. Initiative 83, as most of you on the call know, that was passed 73% in November by the voters. And that is a combination initiative, ranked choice voting in our primaries in general, and semi-open primaries, letting independents vote in our taxpayer-funded primaries. July 14th and July 28th, We had a win, a loss, and a win in the council on July 14th. Ranked choice voting was funded, so that's our win. On July 28th, we experienced a loss. We were not able to get the funding for semi-open primaries, so that means 85,000 independents in DC are still shut out. But we also had a win because so the mayor in DC doesn't like us very much. And so when we won, and we won in a super majority, which is even surprising to me, on the 14th, we had an 8-4 vote. The mayor sent a couple of council people after us to develop a poison pill bill. So at the same time that we were trying to win the open primaries, we were trying to kill this poison pill bill, which was literally introduced at the same time as the semi-open. So we lost the semi-open, but we killed the poison pill. So I consider that a win. Win, loss, win. Yay for us. We now have a fiscal sponsorship for C3 activity. Our C3 activity will be known through the Grow Democracy Civic Education Fund. And we're going to look a lot like we did during campaign mode, lots of grassroots activity, volunteer outreach, door knocking, every festival, every parade between now and the primaries. We will be there. In fact, we started last night with our toe in the water. Big festival coming up in September that tens of thousands of people go to in DC. So we're really gearing up for that. And then the general, of course, in November. With the semi-open, because of the loss, we will continue in lobbying mode for fiscal year 26. Not to be thwarted, I'm going to also pursue trying to get a grant for the Board of Elections. And if we can find someone that can sponsor a grant, they can apply for it. And unless the mayor is in a mood, I don't know, I should stand in the way, but who knows. Third, potentially a legislative track as well, litigation. In other words, we know there's one person that may be filing suit for the rights of independents as a protected class under DC human rights law. There are also some other things we may pursue. So there's a lot going on in DC, a lot. I was at 2 minutes, that was 3, sorry, okay.
That's all right. That was
done.
very, very impressive. Thanks, Lisa. All right, we'll go over to Alexander Clark in Dallas, Texas.
Quick update, everyone. I'm sure many of you are aware, Texas is kind of the center of the gerrymandering discussion in the country. So there are at least 5 members of Congress who are very motivated to get rid of mid-district gerrymandering because they might not have a seat after this. I kind of included this in the chat. It makes me wonder, it's not going to be an exclusively Democratic problem, right? We've already heard all of the talk about retaliation in blue states. So I'm guessing that there's going to be some California Republicans holding seats right now. We're going to be very interested in joining the list of co-sponsors if this threat becomes more real. And I think the same will be true in every red and blue state, because I think this is not going to stop at those 2 states. I think there's been discussions about Missouri and other places already. So that's that. I'm very interested to see how this might create a unique situation to help push this legislation. The second thing, for y'all's awareness, is that the Texas Republican Party, in addition to pursuing these extra 5 seats, have moved to protect their primary elections from any other voters. Texas currently has open primaries, which means anybody can go and vote in that primary. But in addition to their 2024 state convention, where they voted overwhelmingly to close it, they had their state Republican Executive Committee meeting about a couple weeks ago. And overwhelming majority of those members also voted to close their elections. So it's just a matter of time before this gets implemented. It's not ideal. My father-in-law is a perfect example of the kind of person who, might be liberal or progressive on many issues, but because he lives in a small town, he lives in Greenville, Texas. Everyone who is elected in Greenville, Texas is a Republican. And so that he can have some impact on the process, he has always voted in the Republican primary. This will prevent him from being able to do that. And it's going to be something that happens across the state. Texas, as you might know, has the largest number of veterans in the country. And given that we are already the largest number of veterans, take into the consideration the percentages of independents, you can see just how many voters will be disenfranchised by this process. This is a fun fact as well. Maybe not for me as a self-identified Texas Democrat, but Texas Democrats are the longest losing statewide party in the country, red or blue. We haven't won a statewide election since, I think, 1994. And every other state has elected a member of the opposite party statewide more recently than that.
Wow.
And so when you think about the percentage of people who show up to a Republican primary is already pretty limited. Those are the people who are deciding all the statewide elections currently. Yeah. And so that small pool of people is about to get even smaller.
Wow.
All right. So that's my update. Sorry for taking up all the time.
No, Alexander, that's great. And I just want to kind of close this in, unless Eric, you've got another word.
Go ahead.
Well, just, Eric and Alberto and I were talking, we really want to encourage you all to use your voice. And whether that's like being on social media, whether that's being in op-eds, whether that's having conversations, there's so much. And I want to just say this, it's not about jumping into the partisan fray in the way that there's so much swirling around the gerrymandering and, like the move in Texas to start, the response in California, like do two wrongs make a right? Like we're not going to litigate that here. I do think that part of what we need to do though is help frame this in larger terms about the American people just fundamentally losing power because of moves by politicians. Like that meta narrative that also anchors historically with data, I think is so needed right now. So I just encourage folks to write an op-ed, share it with us. We can give you feedback. We can help write it for you if that's helpful. There's a way to do this in a way that isn't just more inflammatory partisan noise, but is like actually thoughtful, educates folks, makes them smarter, and like kind of creates a pathway towards a different conversation. And I think that's part of what we see as being our obligation. So, and I think we do have to, we'll talk later, but I think it'd be really interesting to do a straw poll about just the gerrymandering thing and how do we respond to that moment? Because it is a moment. And if every state starts doing this, like we absolutely need to have a strategy to sort of respond and help direct people towards productive solutions versus just kind of partisan aims. And so, in any event, lots to do here. Super grateful, Dave, for your work again. Lisa, of course. Nancy and Joy, thank you for what you do with the VFW, and encourage everyone to find a way to get involved. And Dennis, what you said just is spot on. There's so many niche opportunities that chambers of commerce and local organizations, and like honestly, the smaller you get, the more local you get, the more impactful you can be. So encourage folks to take this and spread the word. And we were going to keep fighting because America is worth fighting for, and this is like honestly how we move the country forward. It is an honest attempt to do that, and so grateful for everyone's time. And reach out to us. Let us know how we can serve you, and hopefully we get to see you in person.
Yeah.
Before long.
Thanks, everyone. Onward.
I'm going to end with one trivia question. You want one more? Which war prompted Georgia to become the first state to allow soldiers to vote in the field during national elections, setting a precedent during the Civil War? What war? 1846 to 1848, the first war in which Americans could vote in the field, the Mexican-American War.
Wow.
All right, we'll call it there. Thanks, everybody.